Alright guys, and welcome back to the channel, and today I will be giving you my full card predictions and full card breakdown for UFC 317 live June 28th from the T-Mobile Arena, and I absolutely cannot wait to get into it. And I wanted to go ahead real quick and apologize for not having predictions for UFC 316. Life happened, I had some stuff come up, and I just simply did not have time to sit down and record a prediction video for that, but we are right back on track with UFC 317. And we're going to jump right ahead into the very first fight of the night, which is Peyton Talbott versus Felipe Lima, and a very, very interesting fight here at bantamweight. Peyton Talbott, was looking like the next big thing in the division. He was red hot, he was streaking, I mean, he was looking very, very impressive for such a long time. The awesome knockout one-punch KO pretty much of Yanis Gamora. Before that, the TKO of Cameron Simon, just absolutely dominating him. And then before that, the rear naked choke against Nick Aguirre. And I mean, Peyton Talbott was looking very impressive, like the next hot prospect, very well-rounded, sharp hands, fantastic power. And then he ran into Hany Barcelos. And Hany Barcelos, as you know, is a dog. He's a veteran. He's a gritty vet. And he just picked up a huge win against the former champ Cody Garbrandt. And he looked pretty damn good in that fight. So Hany Barcelos really showed, like, hey, this old man ain't done. You want to bring these young bucks in here? I'm going to give them a run for their money, and I'm going to put them through the ringer. And that's what happened to Peyton Talbott, and he got a little bit exposed in that fight. He really got pressured, he got pressed, he got grappled, and, you could kind of tell that green side of him, that developing side of him, was still kind of, struggling in certain areas of that fight. And, Peyton Talbott, for all his talent, he's still developing. He's still very young at 26 years old. Even though the hands are fantastic, the striking's there, the grappling quite isn't there, and the cardio needs to be worked on. And then you look at the other side, Felipe Lima has come into the UFC, and he's looked very good, very impressive, 14-1, had a fantastic fight with Miles Johns. Before that, a submission rear naked choke over Muhammad Naimov. And, this kid has looked very good, very well-rounded, and he is 14-1. So he has a little bit more experience than Peyton Talbott. He's a little older, and, he's looked very well-rounded, very good grappling, very good striking. And, in this fight, even though I would love to give Peyton Talbott a chance to get back on track here, and I think he is going to probably be the slightly better striker in this fight, I don't trust him to have developed enough grappling and takedown defense to stop Felipe Lima in this fight. And I think it's going to be very good. I think it's going to be a fun fight. I think it's going to be competitive. But I feel like Felipe Lima is just a little more well-rounded than Peyton. And he has shown that he's developed he's a little more ahead in the development and that maturity. And I think Felipe Lima is going to edge this fight out. I think he's going to take a decision against Peyton Talbott. I think he will most likely pull out a 29-28 unanimous decision, maybe a 30-27, maybe Peyton hits him with a shot, drops him, lights him up for a round. But I think the experience from Felipe Lima and that fantastic well-roundedness is going to probably pick him up another big win here, and it's going to set Peyton Talbott back just a tiny bit. But who knows? Peyton Talbott could come out, land a big shot, knock him out, and get right back on track. But I'm going to go ahead and side with the more well-rounded, proven fighter in Felipe Lima in this one. Alright, moving on up, we are looking at Jonathan Diniz versus Alvin Hines. And big fight here at heavyweight. Jonathan Diniz, looking pretty solid in the UFC. He's got a lot of KO wins against Austin Lane. That's not saying a whole lot, just kind of a big, hittable dude. Before that, Carl Williams, who's pretty well-rounded and tough, picking up a big decision. And then in the Marcin Tybura fight, he had a big cut. He was hurt. He was rocked. He got up. The doctors were like, are you okay? He seemed like he was okay, and then they waved it off anyway. So it was a little bit of a weird stoppage there. But then on the other hand, Alvin Hines, I know nothing about this guy. I didn't even know this guy was in the UFC until like right before I made this prediction video. So I've never heard of him. I don't know anything about him. Didn't watch any tape on him, but I looked at his record. He's 7-0, but it's against very low competition in the LFA. So I'm not going to hold a lot of weight in that. And, over on the other side, Jonathan's got a huge reach advantage on Alvin. He's got a lot of UFC experience compared to Alvin. And, I'm just not going to trust somebody who's just debuting from the LFA that I've never heard of just to come over and just kind of run through somebody who actually has some UFC experience and some good hands. So I think in this fight, this is probably going to be a toss-up win for Jonathan. Jonathan's not great, but he's got power and he's got UFC experience. And, I think the first round might be a little competitive. He'll find the timing, and then I think he's going to wind up knocking Alvin Hines out. And, not trying to discredit the guy too much, but I'm looking at him, and he kind of looks like a medium-sized butterbean, and, I just don't think there's going to be something huge to this guy. Sometimes you could just look at a dude and go, I think you're probably going to get a little steamrolled. But I'm going to go ahead and side with Jonathan Diniz to pick up the win with a second-round TKO over Alvin Hines. Maybe he's really good, and maybe he's super impressive, but, I didn't watch any tape on him. I think this might even be a short-notice fight for him. It just kind of seems like out of nowhere. But I'm going to go ahead and pick Jonathan Diniz in this one by second-round KO. All right, and now we are moving on up to Nico, the hybrid Price versus Jacoby Smith. And an interesting clash here at welterweight. Nico Price has been around for a long time. He's kind of a UFC vet at this point, but Nico Price has never been that good at all. He has always been very up and down, more down than up, and he's just a very awkward, lanky, kind of bird-bodied fighter. He's very weird. He's defensively weird. He strikes oddly, and Nico Price has just always been kind of that guy that just... Every time he pops up, you're like, this dude's still in the UFC? How does he keep hanging on? And he'll lose, and then he'll pick up a win. But Nico Price is just not that good, and he's 35, He's got a 76-inch reach, which is, pretty decent. But on the other hand here, we are looking at the streaking Jacoby Smith, and he has looked fantastic, knocking out Preston Parsons with a left hook. Before that, on Dana White's Contender Series, knocking out Christian Savoy with ground and pound TKO, and he's looked very, very sharp. And I really liked what I saw from him in the Preston Parsons fight, and he's just got that kind of power where you go, that's a problem. That's a problem power right there, and that sharp striking, the way that he was landing on Preston Parsons. And Preston Parsons, he's pretty tough, not super elite, but he's a tough dude, and he put him away pretty damn cleanly. And, even though Jacoby Smith is pretty new to the UFC and he's young and he's streaking right now, I am pretty much going to pick anybody when it comes to a Nico Price, over Nico Price in a Nico Price fight. And I just do not trust Nico Price. He is not dependable. His striking's not that good. His defense is not that good. We saw what Robbie Lawler did to him. Robbie Lawler came out and just hooked him around the head, hit him 2 or 3 times, TKO'd him. Nico Price has a lot of underwhelming performances, so I am not trusting Nico Price one bit. I don't think he'll have anything for Jacoby Smith in this fight. I think Jacoby's just going to be sharper, younger, faster, and I think he's going to crack Nico Price and knock him out early. So we are going with Jacoby Smith by first round KO in this one. All right, and moving on up to a fantastic fight that I absolutely cannot wait for. This is going to be one of the best fights of the night. We are looking at Brandon Royval versus Joshua Van, and I'm going to go right ahead off the bat and say I absolutely love Joshua Van. This kid is without question the most impressive hot prospect in the UFC right now. I have loved this kid from the minute he stepped into the UFC. His boxing is absolutely beautiful. His technique is fucking fantastic. The way he throws his combinations, the way he mixes it up, his hooks, his shots to the body, his speed, his technique. This kid has looked so good from the start, and he has just gotten better and better and better, and he looked absolutely incredible in his last fight. And, the power was there, the technique, the shots to the body. He looked more accurate than ever, and the kid has just looked so good. And on the other hand, Brandon Royval, as a UFC veteran at this point, good volume striking, good jab, he just stays constantly busy throwing shots out there. And, Brandon Royval is tough for anybody. He's a very, very solid fighter. And, he keeps a good jab, good range, and he keeps a lot of volume out there. And in this fight, Brandon Royval has so much UFC experience, compared to Joshua Van. But the difference in this fight that I think is going to be a key factor is that Joshua Van just has the better, more impactful striking. When Joshua Van hits you, it connects, and he does not miss. He's very, very accurate, and he lands flush. And the one thing with Brandon Royval is for all that volume, with a lot of guys, he has success with that volume, but with certain guys, the optics, it's kind of an optical illusion, because when he fought Brandon Moreno in that last fight, that rematch, he was throwing a lot of volume out there, but his shots were not landing. He was missing. He was throwing a lot of volume, but if you go back and watch that fight, the shots were just not landing. And Brandon Moreno was landing the more impactful strikes in that fight. And Brandon Moreno won that fight. No question in my mind. And again, the strike charts are one of the biggest problems in the UFC right now, where the strike charts are just not accurate. They're saying that a fighter that is missing shots or just grazing, that those shots are landing, and it's not accurate. They'll say that the strikes are dead even, and one fighter is clearly missing punches, but it's like they're counting the missing punches. They're counting the strikes that are blocked, the strikes that are just missing. And it's a really infuriating problem, and it does not tell the true story of the fight, because it happens so often. And when you really pay attention to some of these fights, these guys where the strike chart's saying that it's dead even or they're ahead on strikes, it's complete BS, because they're not. They're missing, they're hitting the block, they're getting checked. Like, it's just not true. So Brandon Royval in that fight, for a lot of the volume that he threw, he was missing. He was not landing, and he was hitting Moreno's block. So, it's a little deceiving there, but even though Brandon Royval's a good striker, he's not super accurate all the time. And just like in the Moreno fight, Moreno should have won that fight with the bigger, more impactful strikes, and the cleaner strikes, and the more significant strikes. And I think in this fight, even though Brandon Royval has a lot of UFC experience, and he's a very high volume striker, I think Joshua Van, for even his young age, he looked so damn good in that last fight. I think Joshua Van is going to land the bigger strikes, the better significant strikes, and he's going to land with more consistency. And I think Joshua Van, even at such a young age of 23, I think he can pull off the biggest win of his young career. And I'm going to say that he beats Brandon Royval 29-28 in a pretty close, probably split decision fight, because I think the same thing is going to happen. I think Brandon Royval is going to throw a lot of volume. It's not really going to connect that much, but the strike charts are going to say that they connected, even though they really didn't. And it's going to look close to the judges, who are probably not going to be paying attention. And then Joshua Van is going to be coming back and ripping shots to the body, landing big shots upstairs. And I'm hoping that the judges will see that the bigger, more impactful, significant strikes are what matter, which they do according to the striking criteria. And hopefully he doesn't get screwed on what appears to be a lot of volume that's landing, but it's actually not. And Joshua Van just lands those bigger moments, the impactful strikes, knocking Brandon Royval back, literally landing with a lot of power. And I hope that Joshua Van could just get around that volume and land the better shots to the head, to the body, and just mix it up so beautifully like he does. So I am going to go with Joshua Van in this fight to pull off the big win, the biggest win of his career, and I think he can just be the better, more impactful, harder striker, and I think he can be more accurate. All right, and moving on up, we are looking at Amil versus Jose Delgado, and a very interesting fight here at featherweight. Amil, just an absolute storm of striking, an absolute storm of problems. He's looked very good. Looked very good in the William Gomis fight. That was a very close fight, very back and forth. William Gomis took about a round, a case almost to take a second round, but then Amil started to come back, really put it on him, really press him up against the cage, and just literally start to try to break William Gomis. And before that, he had the crazy tornado storm TKO of Zhang Yang Li, which was just absolutely crazy. Unloaded about a 50-punch combination on that kid. It was insane. Laura Sanko was going insane on the broadcast. I was losing it, like, oh my god, like, what a storm of shots. It was crazy how many punches he ate. So Amil has looked very good. And on the other hand, Jose Delgado, he looked very good in the Conor Matthews fight, catching him with a overhand right, dropping him to the ground and TKOing him, and then looking very good against Ernie Juarez over on the Contender Series. And, in this fight, even though it's a very interesting, very close style matchup, I think Amil's just looked really good, really well-rounded, very good pressure, very good striking, and he has that kind of style to break you. And I am going to, in this fight, side with Hyder Hamil to just be the better pressure fighter, to land the better volume, to just bring that dog out. And I think Jose Delgado is going to fall behind. And Hyder Hamil is just built for the longer rounds, and he's just built to break you, built to put that pressure on you. And, I give Jose Delgado a solid chance in this fight, but I think Hyder Hamil has looked very impressive, especially in his last 2 fights, and he is 11-0, so, he's undefeated, and I think he's going to keep that streak going here against Jose Delgado. So I am picking Hyder Hamil by decision in this one. All right, and now we are moving on up to a huge fight of the night in Terrence McKinney versus Vyacheslav Borshchev, and this is a super, super interesting fight here because, as we all know, Terrence McKinney is, when he's on, but when he's off, he's big time off, and Terrence McKinney can be a huge coin flip. He's very hard to trust because he'll come out in one fight and absolutely steamroll somebody, one shot knockout. He's got that power, he's got that explosiveness, but then sometimes he will come out in a flurry and he will get caught and dropped bad and knocked out cold. So Terrence McKinney's a very, very high-level coin flip when it comes to trying to pick him in a fight, because you just never know which Terrence you're going to get. Are you going to get the explosive, steamrolling, finishes the fight real quick Terrence, or you're going to get the Terrence that comes out and makes poor fight IQ, gets a little too wild, and gets caught and slept? And, Vyacheslav Borshchev, on the other hand, is, he's a gritty, grizzled vet. He's very well-rounded. He's got good volume striking, good pace. He's very technically sound. He's very well-rounded, good defense. So Vyacheslav, he's a good, solid test, and he's been a tough test for a lot of guys. And in this fight, I look at it and go, Vyacheslav doesn't normally get knocked out. He's normally got a very good chin, but we did see Chase Hooper drop him with a shot, hurt him, rock him, and dominate him. So if someone, a young prospect like Chase Hooper is catching you and dropping you, I think Terrence McKinney, if he touches your chin in the right way, is going to drop you and hurt you. Now, it's very tough because if Terrence McKinney does not knock Vyacheslav out in the first round, or he struggles to put him away, I could see Vyacheslav coming back and just outstriking him for the other 2 rounds. And he could just pull that dog out. Terrence McKinney could get tired because that gas tank is not super proven beyond those early rounds. He tends to struggle and kind of fade. So it does worry me a bit. So Terrence is going to have to come out and really put it on Vyacheslav and put him away early, or he could get outworked by a solid cardio dog. And Vyacheslav is just, he's good. His boxing's good. His technique is good. He's solid. And so I'm not super confident in this pick. I'm really not. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give Terrence McKinney a chance to come out, land a bomb on Vyacheslav, drop him, hurt him, swarm him, unload big shots, and hopefully before Vyacheslav can even recover, the ref will step in a little soon and wave it off. I feel like it's going to be one of those TKOs where Vyacheslav is not fully out. He's trying to recover, but you're going to get like a Mark Goddard in there, or somebody who likes to step in a little quick sometimes, and they're going to wave it off before Vyacheslav can really start to move. But if Vyacheslav gets dropped, if he starts to recover, and Terrence McKinney starts to gas a little bit trying to finish him, I could see Vyacheslav coming back and beating him 29-28, just taking a decision. But I'm going to go ahead and give Terrence McKinney that coin flip chance. The T-Rex comes out, lands the bomb on Vyacheslav, swarms him with shots, and the ref steps in a little early. So I am going to say Terrence McKinney, coin flip, lands the KO, and takes the win over Vyacheslav Borshchev here. All right, we are moving on up to Jack the Joker Hermansson versus Gregory RoboCop Rodrigues, and this is a super fun fight at middleweight. Jack Hermansson, been around a long time, kind of a grizzled vet at this point, win-lose, solid grappling, kind of weird striking on the feet, a little herky-jerky. He's got a weird style, but Jack Hermansson's he's a pretty solid test for a lot of guys, and he kind of sits right in the middle of the division, and just one of those dudes that you're going to hit that middle of the road speed bump as you kind of start to climb the ladder into the top 10. And, Jack Hermansson's never going to be a real, top 5 fighter. He's never going to win a belt, but he's a pretty solid test, and he hangs around. But Gregory Rodrigues, on the other hand, this guy is an absolute RoboCop. I mean, he is a steel Terminator of problems sometimes. And, outside of his last loss, to Jared Cannonier, which was a really interesting fight because he was looking good early and then he gassed. His cardio started to dump on him by like the middle of the second round. And I cannot fully remember what it was, but Gregory Rodrigues had something going on in that fight. He was either sick or he had staph infection. Something happened because his cardio dropped very quickly, unusually quickly, and he's been in dog fights before where his cardio looked good. And I remember watching that fight going, man, like he's already tired. Like that's very unlike him. And then Jared Cannonier was just able to come back on him. And Jared Cannonier has fantastic cardio, as we know, and just put a beating on him. So Gregory, I'm going to give him a pass in that fight because I cannot remember what it was, but something was going on with Gregory. It was a bad weight cut, a sickness, something. But I think in this fight, even though Jack Hermansson is very tough, you know, he's a good middle of the road, you know, kind of challenge when you start to approach that upper ladder. I think Gregory Rodrigues is just going to be too much on the feet for Jack Hermansson. Jack Hermansson's not super quick. His defense isn't great. He's a little herky-jerky. He's a little odd in a lot of ways. And I think Gregory RoboCop is just, he's faster, he's more powerful, he's got the technique, he's got the boxing. And I just cannot see Jack Hermansson holding up to that pressure and that power for that long. And I think he's going to probably try to shoot in on takedowns on Gregory. I don't think he's going to be successful. I don't see him getting takedowns on RoboCop. And I think RoboCop is just going to fire back, make him pay, crack him, hurt him. And I'm going to say Gregory Rodrigues TKOs Jack Hermansson in the second round. If not, he is going to cleanly outstrike him for 3 rounds and pick up a 30-27 unanimous. But we are going to go Gregory RoboCop Rodrigues by second round KO in this one. All right, and we are moving on up to Viviane Araujo versus Tracy Cortez in a super interesting fight here at flyweight. Tracy Cortez, you know, she has looked pretty solid for the majority of her UFC career. Only coming off a recent loss to Rose Namajunas, but you can't dog her too much for that. Rose is phenomenal, a former champion, one of the greatest of all time. But before that, she was on a massive streak, picking up wins against Stephanie Edgar, Justine Kish, Melissa Gatto, and then Jasmine Jasdavicius, which is a very solid win because Jasmine Jasdavicius is a solid grappler and a very solid problem in the women's division herself. And then you look over on the other hand at Viviane Araujo, and she's okay. She's very up and down, win, lose, 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 win, lose. You know, so Viviane struggles, you know, and she's got solid skills, she's got good striking, sometimes occasionally good grappling, but she's getting up there in age. She's 38 years old, and she's had more losses than wins. So I don't think Viviane's ever going to have a new, like, you know, wrench in her game where she's going to suddenly start picking up a lot of wins at 38. I don't think she's going to evolve too much more past where she's at right now. And I think she's kind of plateaued, and I just can't see her getting a whole lot better. And then Tracy Cortez, on the other hand, even though she's not super impressive, you know, she's a dog. She's a pit bull. She's got good grappling. She's got pretty good striking, and she's younger. She's a lot younger than Viviane Araujo. And I think that's just going to pay off for her in this fight. I think she's going to be younger, quicker, the cardio is going to be better, and I think there's going to be probably a good amount of grappling in this, holding Viviane against the cage, landing some jabs, mixing up some shots, maybe taking her down. And I'm just going to side with the younger fighter that's on a better streak here, and I'm going to say Tracy Cortez picks up probably a 30-27 unanimous over Viviane Araujo. Maybe Viviane makes it a little close and around, maybe steals a round off Tracy, and then Tracy starts to come back. It's a 29-28, but I'm going to say Tracy Cortez picks up the decision over Viviane Araujo in this one. All right, and now we are moving on up to Beneil Dariush versus Renato Moicano, and a very interesting fight here at lightweight. Beneil Dariush and Renato Moicano, you know, are both UFC veterans at this point. They've been around for a long time. Beneil Dariush, you know, he's been around for quite a few years now. He's always been kind of solid, but never a top-level threat. You know, he's had some very impressive wins. His Drakkar close knockout was incredible. That comeback knockout where he was hurt and then started hurting Drakkar, chased him across the cage and knocked him out, knocked his mouthpiece out. That was probably Beneil's most impressive win yet. I mean, that was such an awesome comeback KO. But outside of that, like Beneil Dariush, you know, even though he's a solid fighter, he's got good grappling and he's got okay striking. He's had it tough and he's been out a long time. He's had a lot of like layoffs, like injuries, surgeries, and it's kept him out of the cage for a very long time. And then he's had it very tough in his last 2 fights. He got knocked out by Charles Oliveira, and then he got viciously knocked out by Arman Tsarukyan, a very, very tough knockout. And, you know, Beneil's been around. He's had some tough losses, some good wins, but then Renato Moicano, I am not the biggest Moicano fan. I don't think he's that good. I think he's very mid-level. You know, he's got good striking. He's got good jiu-jitsu, very good jiu-jitsu if he gets on top of you. That's his bread and butter. That's his best way to the win. But, you know, outside of the recent loss to Islam Makhachev, which I called, I thought that was going to be a very easy win for Islam, and it surely was. Took him down, submitted him. Not much of a fight there. Before that, got the win over Benoit Saint Denis, and Benoit, just didn't look great in that fight. Got a cut over the eye. It was a doctor stoppage. And then before that, got the very lucky win against Jalen Turner. But Jalen Turner had Moicano beat, dead to rights in that fight, knocked out. But Jalen Turner made a critical mistake, didn't finish, didn't let the ref pull him off. He walked away thinking the fight was over. The ref didn't stop it. Moicano got up, came back, and beat him. So, you know, I don't hold a lot of weight in that Jalen Turner fight because if Jalen had followed up with one or two more punches, Moicano's done. But, you know, that was a mistake on Jalen's part, and then he got the doctor stoppage against Benoit Saint Denis, which is always, unfortunate because it's a cut stoppage, and it's not like a legitimate, can't defend yourself TKO stoppage, but it's still a legitimate win in the book. But, in this fight, even though they are both 36 years old, they're both about the same height, 1 inch difference in height for Moicano and the same reach, a lot of similarities here. I think Renato Moicano is the more dangerous fighter. He's got the better jiu-jitsu. He's got the better striking. Beneil Dariush is a little stiff in the way that he strikes, the way that he stands, his stance, and I've never liked that about him, and it's gotten him caught in fights and hurt. So he's a little stiff. He's not super athletic. He's not very flexible, and Moicano moves. Moicano still has flexibility and dexterity, and he's got some sharpness and some looseness there. So I think in this fight, Renato Moicano is just going to be a little faster, a little more well-rounded. He's going to be sharper with the hands. And I went back and forth on this finish because I could see Moicano dropping Beneil, getting on top of him, TKOing him. That's a high possibility. Beneil Dariush has only been submitted one time in his career because he's a very good grappler himself. And I kind of went back and forth on Renato getting on top of him, wrapping up an arm triangle, dropping bombs, flipping him over to his stomach, grabbing a choke. That's very possible. So there is a high possibility Moicano gets a finish in this fight. But I went back and forth on it, and I went, you know what? I'm going to settle on a decision because I think that Moicano's just going to probably beat him up on the feet a little bit, take him down, and probably just sit on top of him for 3 rounds. And I think Beneil will probably be able to defend off the submissions, and he's not going to be able to get up, and I think Moicano is just going to sit on top of him. And if Moicano gets, to mount, if he's able to get past his guard and just move on him easily, Moicano probably will get to mount and finish him. But I'm just going to say Renato Moicano picks up a 30-27 decision over Beneil Dariush, and if he gets to a dominant position early, he probably finishes the fight by TKO or submission. But we're going to go Renato Moicano in this one by decision. All right, and now we are moving on up to Alexander Pantoja versus Kai Kara-France, the rematch, and a super interesting fight here at flyweight. And, Alexander Pantoja has just looked incredible as a champion. He has just been blowing through everybody. Brandon Moreno, Alex Perez, Brandon Royval, Steve Erceg, Kai Asakura. He's just looked so good. The grappling's phenomenal. The submission, the jiu-jitsu game is phenomenal. And Kai Kara-France, he's such a ball of fun, man. One of the best fighters to come out of city kickboxing. He's very sharp on the feet, very technical. He reminds me of almost like a TJ Dillashaw in the way that he fights. He's just very tactical in how he moves, how he throws his shots. And Kai Kara-France, he's got a very high fight IQ. And, Kai Kara-France looks really good in fights, and then in some fights, he winds up getting caught, and Brandon Moreno was able to catch him with the body kick, dropped him, TKO'd him. Then Amir Albazi picked up the split decision on him, but Kai Kara-France is still a problem. He's very good on the feet, very good striking, very, very solid combinations. And, his grappling normally holds up. Normally guys have a hard time getting him down. But I look at this fight and go, Alexander Pantoja, his bread and butter are his takedowns. And on average, he gets about 4 to 6 takedowns in most of his fights. So his grappling is very hard to deal with. That pressure's very hard to deal with. And, Pantoja will stand with you for a little while, but once he feels like he doesn't have to stand with you anymore and he wants to shoot takedowns, he normally gets them. And it's going to be interesting to see if Alexander Pantoja can take Kai Kara-France down easily. And I'm very interested to see how that's going to work out and that dynamic plays out once he decides to kind of close the distance and start to shoot on him. But, you know, if he starts to get Kai Kara-France down, I think that's going to be a problem. And, you know, I don't know if Kai Kara-France is going to be able to fend off enough of those takedowns to keep it on the feet and outstrike Alexander Pantoja because he's so good in that area. And I want to say that Kai Kara-France is going to make this interesting for about a round and a half. Looking good, maybe 2. It's going to be real fun and back and forth on the feet. But I can't imagine that he's going to be able to survive the grappling and the submission game from Pantoja in the long run. And I think eventually Kai Kara-France is going to be landing some shots, looking good on the feet. But then when Alexander times those takedowns, I think he's going to get Kai Kara-France on his back. He's going to control him on the ground. Kai Kara-France is probably going to get up in a scramble, maybe gets, you know, held against the cage, makes a mistake, gets his neck caught, and I think Alexander Pantoja is going to wind up grabbing a guillotine on him in a quick cage scramble, and I think he's going to wind up submitting Kai Kara-France. And if he doesn't, I think he's going to wind up picking up probably a 48-47 unanimous decision on Kai Kara-France, 3-2, you know, even a 49-46, 4-1. So I want to give Kai Kara-France a big chance in this fight. He is very good. I like him, but I think Pantoja's just been too dominant. He knows how to win. He knows how to implement that grappling, you know, and he's just a Terminator in that area. And I don't know if Kai Kara-France can hold that off very long. So I'm going to pick Alexander Pantoja to out-grapple Kai Kara-France somewhere in the second and third round and pick up a mistake submission from Kai Kara-France, just making a mistake in a scramble. And then Alexander Pantoja is just going to lock something up. If not, he takes the decision. So Alexander Pantoja by third round submission is the official pick. All right, and we are moving on up to our main event of the evening, and I absolutely cannot wait to talk about this. We are looking at Ilia Topuria versus Charles do Bronx Oliveira, and this is such an amazing, awesome fight. I cannot wait to talk about this. So we are looking at Ilia Topuria coming on up to lightweight to the vacant belt against Charles Oliveira, and Islam Makhachev moving on up to welterweight to chase that belt. So we have a vacant belt here, and this is such an incredible fight. And, you know, we look over at Ilia Topuria, and he has looked absolutely phenomenal from the minute he stepped into the UFC. Some of the best pure boxing and some of the nastiest raw cannon power we have ever seen. And Ilia Topuria right now is hands down the best boxer in the UFC when it comes to technique, when it comes to speed, and easily when it comes to power, because he has the scariest one-punch power in the division right now. And I mean, we have seen what he did to Jai Herbert with that overhand right, when he slept Alexander Volkanovski, I mean, out cold. What he did to Max Holloway was absolutely incredible. And I picked him to win that fight, but I did not think he was going to knock Max Holloway out. I mean, and Max Holloway, as we all know, one of the greatest fighters of all time, one of the most exciting fighters of all time, and one of the best chins of all time. We have never even seen Max Holloway get hurt in a fight. And in that fight, Ilia Topuria came down the center, cracked him with a big right, and we saw Max Holloway for the first time stumble. And you could see the panic in Max's face, like, oh shit, like, that was a different kind of punch. I've never felt that kind of power. And when you look at that moment and you see that on Max's face, you knew the tide was turning there. That's when Ilia kind of had his number. Like, Ilia's going to start to land shots now. And the only thing that I worried about was like, oh God, don't punch yourself out, Ilia. Don't start throwing a bunch of wild shots at Max. You start missing, he starts eating the shots, and then you gas. He needs to pick these shots carefully because Max is hurt, Max is stunned, and if he can land another shot or two in the right spot, he might be able to get him. And sure enough, Max backed up from that shot. Ilia, they got in an exchange, and Ilia just dropped him with that hook. And we see Max Holloway hit the floor, get TKO'd for the first time in his career, and it was absolutely insane. And we knew that Ilia had disgusting power when he knocked out Volk the way he did. But when you knock out Max Holloway like that, you have God power, you know, and it just, that power is different, and it's scary. And we look over at Dubronx, we look over at Charles Oliveira, and one of the greatest fighters of all time, one of the greatest UFC lightweights of all time. Such a well-rounded, dynamic nightmare of a problem. One of the best fighters to ever come out of Brazil. His jiu-jitsu is absolutely at the highest level it can be. His striking has, looked so great over the years. The mix-up combinations that he throws, that clean boxing, the hook that he dropped Michael Chandler with. I mean, there is pretty much no other fighter right now in the division that is as well-rounded as Charles Oliveira, because he's got high-level striking, deadly high-level black belt jiu-jitsu, and he's so good everywhere, and he mixes it up so well. And I love Oliveira. He's just looked better and better and better over the years, the older that he's gotten, and he's just been in some of the best fights that we've ever seen. And, in this fight, I went back and forth on this because, Charles Oliveira is such a problem. He's so well-rounded. And one thing that we don't know with Ilya is how good is, yes, he does have some grappling, but he doesn't showcase it in most of his fights. But Oliveira, on the other hand, does have that grappling in his back pocket. He does have that sneaky spider jiu-jitsu where he can just get a hold of you, get on your back, hold you in a body triangle, grab a neck while you're standing. Oliveira's just so well-rounded. It has so many tools in the belt. But the one kryptonite with Charles Oliveira is he gets hit with big shots in fights a lot, and he gets dropped. We have seen Charles Oliveira get cracked with massive punches, dropped and hurt, and almost knocked out many times. Chandler dropped him and knocked him out. We've almost knocked him out. We've seen Charles Oliveira get his chin cracked and hurt many times, and that is what scares me in this fight, because we're looking at other fighters that have pretty good power that are dropping Oliveira with these shots and these exchanges. But then you look over at someone like Ilia Topuria, who has the touch of death. You cannot have a compromised chin or a somewhat weak chin and eat that punch. You just can't. And, if those guys are dropping Oliveira in fights and having him in so much trouble and panicking and trying to recover, I think in this fight, as long as it's on the feet, Oliveira is playing a very dangerous landmine game. And I think Oliveira can hang in there for a little bit. But at some point, Oliveira is going to step in the pocket with Ilya. Ilya is so good with his head movement, the way he comes in, the way he circles his defense, the way he's able to get around shots, dip underneath, come up with hooks. And I think Oliveira at some point is going to try to hang on the feet with him too long. And Ilya is going to counter under. He's going to come up under. He's going to dip. He's going to land a counter shot. And I think he's going to hurt Charles Oliveira bad. And we're going to see Oliveira hit the ground, possibly out cold. I mean, a half out cold, laying there almost limp. Or I think, Ilya is going to come under with a counter, drop him. Oliveira's going to hit his ass. He's going to be like, what the hell just happened to me? And Ilya is going to follow up and wind up TKOing him. And I just cannot see a world where Oliveira stays on the feet with Ilya and outstrikes him and knocks him out, because I think Ilya can eat a shot from Oliveira. And I think Ilya has the better striking offense. He's got the better head movement. He's got the better defense. And Oliveira, leaves that chin up in the air. We've seen Islam drop him with a hook and submit him. Islam dropped him. Chandler dropped him. Many other people have dropped him, and you just cannot eat that power from Ilya. It's just different. It's next level punching power. So, there's always a chance that Ilya makes a mistake, in the pocket, and Oliveira winds up grabbing him, taking him down, gets on his back against the cage or something and winds up maybe submitting Ilya, but I just don't see it. I think Ilia Topuria's boxing, his technique, his power, his speed is going to be too much. And I think historically, with the way that Oliveira holds his chin up in the air, gets caught with his hands down, it's a recipe to just get put out cold or nearly cold. So I am going to say that Ilia Topuria finds the range in the second round, has the better dip in and out head movement, comes up over a hook or a shot from Oliveira, lands that counter, and knocks him out. And we are going to have a new lightweight champion and a double champ for Ilia Topuria, winning 2 belts in 2 different weight classes. And I think he's going to move on to 17-0. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching these predictions. If you liked what you saw, please hit the like button. Please subscribe. It massively helps me out. And I will see you for my predictions with UFC 318. Take care.